All right, fight fans, welcome to another edition of No Standing Boxing Talk and episode number 3 of Beyond the Ropes. And I'm happy to have as my guest today, writer, commentator, opinionist, if you want to call it that. Very smart, very witty, very funny. Marquis Johns. How you doing, brother?
Jacob, thanks for having me on, man. It's great to be on, and I'm pretty good, man. Really excited, man. We're finally getting fights now, and despite it being the second quarter of 2022, it's about freaking time. Seriously.
Yeah. Boxing was a little bit dull, but you know what, man? Boxing is going to be boxable. Today, we're here to highlight you, and all your contributions to boxing. First and foremost, man, I am a fan of your work. I enjoy reading your stuff. And by the way, welcome to our team at NYFights.com. But I was reading your stuff before you came to us. I just wanted to highlight you and kind of celebrate you today. Tell our listeners today a little bit about yourself. Tell us about, your come up, your family, where you're from, what turns you up, what turns you down, what you got going on, man.
Oh, simple. I'll start from the basics, man. Been doing boxing on and off for about 10 years. Started originally back in the old days when people used to work for the newspaper. The now defunct Tampa Tribune back in the early 2000s used to hire freelancers to write for fights. And back in those days, this is around 2002, 2003. This is when Jeff Lacey was still taking over Tampa at this point, Roy Jones and Tarver. So I was able to just hang out at local fight clubs at like the Alucard Pavilion and stuff like that. And just like I got to the point where I was like, you know what? And it's funny, Jacob. I tell everybody the same story about how I got into boxing. It's one I'm really surprised a lot more people haven't figured out yet. Where it's like I want to see the fights and I want to sit close and down low on ringside. Well, I ain't a D-list celebrity or have any D-list celebrity money. So you got one or two options, either be part of the broadcast or work for it. So I figured, hey, if I start writing about it, hey, it'll put me close to the fights because I'm blind, as you well know. And sure enough, history is made. I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. So, man, that's all. At least you're honest about it,
Listen, ringside's like $500 on some of these fight cards, guys. I'm sorry, that is just not in the budget, man. For real, like no.
And that's why that's what what we already started off with a bag, man, and that's exactly why I wanted you to show, man, because your humor comes out of your writing, and we're gonna get to that. But where did Marquis cut his teeth at? Where did you grow up?
I pretty much grew up in Tampa, man, for the most part. I've been pretty much raised for a majority of my childhood down there. I moved out here to Denver last June. I was one of the few folks that took advantage of this great resignation shenanigans. And
so you were part of Tampa when they had the ugly orange type of Buccaneers uniform.
Oh yeah, I was there for the. Oh man, I was.
The Vinny Testaverde years.
Those creamsicle Sundays, man. Yeah, and it's funny because back in those days, especially in the early '90s, those games were blacked out. Like you weren't watching a Bucs game at home. Like you were watching like all of our kids back in those days, The Littlest Pet Shop or The Little Shop of Horrors, whatever.
That's right.
Blacked out movie I put on. It was the same two movies. I mean, I think I saw King Kong as a kid like 48 times, man. Like I was like, forget it.
Yeah. So Tampa, and so what was young Marquis like? What was some of the things that what were some of your hobbies? What was it like being a young Marquis in those adolescent ages when we start to kind of get to know ourselves and feel ourselves right around 13, 14 years old?
Oh, young dumb Marquis was all over the place, man. I was trying to get into any sport I could whatsoever. What I realized very, very quickly and very, very soon was I wasn't very good at too much of any of them, with the exception of track. I did run track in high school. I was all right with that. Yeah. Like outside of running, like if it involved a ball or a stick or a glove, but no, I was holding down the bench next to the Gatorade bucket, and I just wasn't happening. So for the most part, between that and just I was doing that. Now I was a big time film kid as a kid growing up. That was my thing. Like especially in the '90s, especially when Scream came out. Like I was one of those dopes that could quote to you Scream. That was my whole thing, and it was just one of the things that always just took off. But I've always been following sports forever, Jacob. Like. Not besides just boxing. Boxing was just, boxing's king personally. But for me, it was always baseball and football, mainly because as a Lions fan growing up as, football, Barry Sanders was the king, and he's still running over people now to this day. He hasn't done the field in 2 decades. And between that and baseball, because like when the Florida Marlins in '93 first came down in Miami, that was the first real baseball team in Florida. For years, it was just like spring training. You'll see the Reds on TV on some third-tier channel. You'll run around and see Braves. Like everybody else, you'll see the Braves and the Cubs on cable, and old man Harry Carey, mispronounce names and stuff, that whole nonsense. But you'll get all of that. But for the most part, like in Florida, until the Marlins showed up in '93, losing left and right, and and John Lynch throwing pitches and got Orestes Destrade at first base, swinging at 0-2 breaking balls in the dirt. I mean, Benito Santiago grounding out. I mean, until that team showed up, like baseball was like kind of like a seasonal thing in Florida for the most part. And then they got the Rays after the fact. But for the most part, I was always just following sports locally as a kid, just growing up and wanted to be part of it somehow, some way. Just realized I didn't have the attributes and the genetic makeup, of course, but it's all right.
No, I think most of us gravitate to sports initially because, believe it or not, that's where the in crowd is, So, and like me, my first love, believe it or not, was basketball. And I tried out for my elementary school basketball team, and I found out that my 4'11" ass wasn't going to be playing basketball anytime soon. And people fail to inform me that talent and skill goes along with playing sports. I thought you could see it on TV. I thought I could do it too. And I found out very quickly that, no. So most of us that follow, sports and can't do it, we sort of gravitate to watching and commentating and growing up in the era of sports that we grew up in, because you just took me back to Barry Sanders. And I remember, excuse me, I remember with the Marlins with the expansion team, the colors that they picked, I could care less that they won a game. They just looked good. They
were the uniforms in the early 90s, because people forget, like in the early 90s, people were still wearing these pastel colors.
Yeah, the Marlins teal and gray,
80 blue.
Yeah, the Marlins teal and gray took baseball by storm, because baseball at that time, the uniforms were like, blah. You had the typical pinstripe Yankees, you had the gray and red for the Red Sox, the orange and black for the Tigers. But when that Marlins came with that teal and that gray, man, it set it off. And when Barry Sanders would do what he do, you couldn't help but to be in awe and fall in love with sports. In the era we came up with sports, you cannot help but to fall in love with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton. In baseball, Mark McGwire before the steroid era, and all those guys, man, the Bash brothers, Canseco and Mark McGwire, when they were in Oakland, you couldn't help but to fall so in love with that. But along in the midst of that, I'm chronicling, because I want to write. I believe, and maybe Marquis, you can help me out with this. I believe that we lived through the best era in sports history. Think about it, man. You had the 1980 Miracle Hockey team. You had the Celtics versus Lakers. You had the Michael Jordan era. We lived through the Tiger Woods era. We lived through the Dale Earnhardt era. We lived through, we lived through Joe Carter and the Toronto Blue Jays and that magical walk-off. I mean, I think we lived through.
Yeah.
Right. And then along with that, we lived through one of the best eras of boxing, man. So what turned you on to boxing?
You know what's funny? As a dumb kid growing up, the one thing that I had that I realized was more of a luxury looking back on it now was I was one of the few kids growing up in like middle school that had cable, and they had cable. You were watching USA because that was the channel that all the kids were watching. You were watching for the old ass Mr. T cartoons that were on during the day, or the goofy Scrabble game shows or whatever have you. Or more importantly, USA Tuesday Night Fights, which was a staple on USA Network for ages.
With Sean O'Grady.
And I'm really surprised. Sean O'Grady and Steve Albert, giving you the
That's
fights
right.
or replaying a fight from before. That was fun stuff. And in those fights, it always varied. It was never like it was either a high level club show or just a random fight from like a TVKO pay-per-view or whatever have you, or a Larry Holmes contest from Jacksonville or something. It was always a fight that you want to see that was always interesting. And that got me hooked also. And it's funny because as a kid growing up, I grew up in Detroit. In my mom's house back in those days when Tyson Mania was a thing, we were the house on the block that had the cable. So thanks to statute of limitations, how did we get that cable? Take a guess. But we were the house that had the cable. So we were always a place to be at for watching, Tyson, knock down, Tyson Tucker or Spinks. And it's,
my God.
And it's funny because my favorite story to this day as a 5-year-old was mom got Tyson Spinks, and that fight may have lasted probably 4 minutes. And my favorite thing still is people were still coming after the fact to come to this house party thinking like, hey, we're for a Tyson fight. Mom's at the front of being the landlord, like, y'all late, this fight's over, KO won.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up things like that, man. Because man, our childhoods were epic in that sense. But people don't know how good Tuesday night fights was, man.
Yes.
That's where you got guys like Omar Shika, James Thunder, Angel Manfredi, uh, uh, the king of the four rounders. What was it? That's what he got discovered. What was his name?
Yeah, Butterbean.
Butterbean. Yeah, man. There was some.
Right.
Yeah, remember the James Thunder like 3-second knockout in the first round?
Yeah.
There was some good stuff. And Sean O'Grady was good, and Steve Alba was good, man. Tuesday Night Fights was a good time, and I wish they would bring stuff like that. Friday Night Fights was good too. I think Friday Night Fights was on ESPN.
Yeah, and it's weird because I wish they would bring something like that back where they had boxing on during the weekday. I know Ring City had that.
Ring City was trying it, yeah.
Yeah, and to this day, no one can give me a straight answer. By the way, hey, when is Ring City coming back? I keep getting soon. You would have thought I was asking about Dr. Dre's Detox album, Jacob, about this Ring City stuff now at this point. So,
I enjoyed it, man. I enjoyed the on location, the parking lot of Freddie Roach's gym.
Yeah, outside the freaking freeway.
The plaza in San Juan in Puerto Rico. They had a good thing, a good concept going with that, man.
Going, and I'm surprised they haven't brought that back. I don't know if it's on NBC or they just didn't want to deal with it. I know NBC probably lost every single dollar they had in this Olympic Games because it's this bizarre appization of America where they're making everyone try to go to the app. I don't know if anyone notices this, but 70% of all Americans, despite cable sucking, still have cable. So I don't know where this transition is coming from, but tell me anything you like. But I really do think that they need to bring stuff like that back. Just weekday fight cards in general. Like the fact that the United States doesn't have like a normal weekday like fight card like it used to like for the last like 5 decades to me is unreal because it's like there's sports on every day. Like I mean, baseball just is back in season. Thank God, because I didn't want to be reliant, Jacob, on MLB The Show being my only source of baseball this year. So we actually get real baseball, thankfully. But you would think with like especially with stuff like that, especially with baseball coming around, like the slow seasons, like the dog days of summer, like put on a Wednesday night fight like they used to on ESPN, a little better, preferably. I mean, that's when those ESPN Tuesday night cards in the early 2000s with Nate Campbell taking over the reins and whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys, but it was a thing.
Yeah. No, it's crazy, man. And let me tell you, again, back to you. And do you remember your first assignment?
My first assignment so long ago. I want to say it was a Jeff Lacey squash match, and it was I remember everything except the actual guy that Jeff Lacey beat down in I think less than 2 rounds. It was one of his sparring partners. I remember that much because I remember at the day of the weigh-in, not only did they shake hands, they fist bumped on the way out. So I was like, oh, this is really not competitive on that Friday. And sure enough, it wasn't. But I remember this being like at the old in Tampa. It's been called 40 million things. If you pull up on YouTube, they call it the Egypt Lake Shrine. When I was going to it as a kid, before they finally closed it down, it was called the a la carte pavilion, and that's where they had all these fight cards back to back, local club shows, like especially in the 80s, like the old Peltz cards, like the Frank Fletcher fights. Those were all there. Some John Mukabe guy, he all fought there. That's where that place was, because it was at the a la carte pavilion. It pretty much it's a multi-purpose arena, a place that sits like 2,000 places that does like 8 million things. One night I'll have boxing, the next night I'll have your job's company Christmas party. It's one of those venues. So it was always a good time there. And like I remember talking to the ring card girls, trying to get a couple of numbers. That didn't work out, but I did to see Jeff Lacey nonetheless. And
man, Jeff Lacey, I like Jeff Lacey, man. And
that was real, guys. I'm telling you that right now. Back in those days, that was legit.
That was legit. So this is why. And I could tell, man, that you're a humble guy and you don't like to shine, but I'm a shine, man. I'm gonna shine you for a little bit, okay? This is why I like reading your stuff, because every writer has a voice. I think if you read my stuff, you know my voice. I think you know that I'm a romanticizer. I like to I like to touch people's hearts, man. I'm always writing my articles to kind of, because boxing is just that thing for me, man. Boxing just captures everything of life, man. The ups, the downs, the good, the bad. For me, my first introduction to boxing, like a lot of folks, was the Rocky movie. And then later on, I branched off and started getting into it. And saw, oh shit, that actually happens in real life. People, but what's unique about you is that you have a lot of voices when you write. You don't have just one. You have a very humor way of writing your articles where you actually capture the essence of what you're trying to say, but you also find a way to add some humor to it. Sometimes you could be a little sarcastic and cynical.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you do, especially when you do your deadline reporting, it is straight to the point. Boom, this is what happened. And, you know, how are you able to manage all those writing styles? Most of us just have the one voice people know. I'm reading Jacob Rodriguez, I'm reading Abraham, I'm reading Mike Woods. But with Marquis, how do you do that, man?
For me, man, I'll let you in on the sausage on my end. Yeah, I wish I looked because I say I had like ghostwriters and a writing team behind me, but of course we all can't afford any of that. But no, what it really is on my end, man, is that I always write the way I always want to perceive how I read it back to myself. Where it's like to me, I always want every article that I write to have either be a conversation of either what happened, either just explain like a fight recap or whatever happened, or like a training camp report, or just like if I'm just being sarcastic as all hell, because I do love doing that more than anything else. Because for me, it gives me an outlet. For me, it's always been like a creative writing kind of thing. I was the kid in high school that was writing poems that were terrible raps essentially. Now essentially it sounds like Nelly's like second album. Actually, it's kind of disappointing on so many levels. I was ahead of my time in '97, not 2004. Oof, that was rough. But the one thing I always want to do when I write, if anything that I write is, I just want to be able to convey what my message is and get my point across. As long as you understand my point and see where I'm coming from, and that's always been my biggest thing. Because if you read some articles, it's just like, all right, so this is happening in Vegas. All right, cool. I don't know anything more except the press clippings and what they're telling me, and that training camp was great. That's pretty much all they give you. So it's like, all right, you got. Once you peel back that chip, and then you keep going to the bottom of the can of Pringles, then you realize what you got in terms of stories, and then that's where my stuff comes from more often than not.
What was your most memorable moment in all your years of journalism?
My most memorable moment was actually when I got to meet the folks that I finally got to idolize. Actually, that was more than anything else. Where like I finally got to run into at Davis Gamboa in 2019. I finally got to run into the Floyds and the Ellerbys and whatnot in the Mayweather Promotions camp. And it's funny because I just get to talk to these folks like normal human beings, like everybody else does. And I think that's one of the biggest perceptions that I think a lot of folks have with boxing media, where it's like they think we're on like this weird like pedestal where it's like, oh, we talk to these folks because we're these people. Like, no, we're really just fucking fans like everybody else. It's just we're just here to write about it. I mean, really, but. It's funny because I got to meet Floyd, and it's funny because my favorite Floyd to this day is the one time I met him there was I had to wait for Shaq. So not only got to meet Shaq, I got to meet Floyd, and it was fun because Shaq did that. Shaq, I think, does this to everything. I think he must have thought I was 12 because I do look small in person apparently, and he was like, "Oh, hey, little fella," and it's like, and he did the hand thing to me, and it's like, man, I'm 5'8", like I'm not gonna jump, bro, but. So I thought that was fun, but then afterwards I got to talk to Floyd, who was wearing Versace shades and sweatpants. Classic Floyd Mayweather, by the way. So it was fun. That was one of the fun things I wanted to meet. Because I always wanted to meet Floyd, and I never got to meet Floyd in the ring, but I got to meet him outside of it. So that was personally my personal favorite.
And that absolutely comes out in your writing. You actually portray that you are just having fun and doing what you love to do, like most of us in this business. And
yeah. I never want to pander to folks, but that's the one thing I realized with some of the if you read like some of the older stuff where it's like, especially like in the early 90s, like that whole like era of like Read magazine, like those magazines, man, they're badgering the shit out of you, man. It's like I don't want to be talked down to or condescending. No, listen, in this day and age, no one wants that smoke. So it's like, nah, just have a conversation with them and have fun with it. It's like,
just have fun with it. Yeah, I usually try to have fun with mine, but I absolutely roasted Chris Colbert Chris Colbert the other day. But sometimes you just got to call some stuff out,
that's the thing too. That's one thing I always tell myself is like, I just call it like I see it. My 4 eyes saw that he was getting smoked too, like you wrote about, and it's like, man, this is not for nothing. That Colbert Fair article you wrote was pretty fair. That was one-way traffic. I'm surprised that the judge gave him a round, but that's neither here nor there in Vegas.
Yeah,
because I went back and watched that whole fight card because that was actually one of the better fight cards we had in the last like 8 months of this year so far. In fact, I'm going to go on and make a hot take for you here. That was the best fight card we've had so far this year. I couldn't name you anything else. I mean, it wasn't the Don King show. I watched that. It wasn't the ESPN Plus shows. I've wrote about that. It ain't those. It wasn't It wouldn't Pedraza Ramirez last.
It was
last
epic,
Friday.
man. That article was epic, man. I was like, man, I was reading that thing. I was like, and he told me, he was like, hey, I like your Cobra, but I'm going to raise you. Wait till I drop this joint.
Yeah.
So,
well, my thing was, it's like, how, like, my thing is, especially with us in media, was like, we have it. My thing is like, we have a voice for the voiceless. And the one thing I read on Twitter all the time is people complaining, because that's what Twitter's for, essentially. I mean, to complain, get free food, tell McDonald's they don't use real meat, and hope you're gonna give you a gift card or something. You know, whatever you use Twitter for, be my guest. But my whole thing was, it's like, we're not going to sit here and talk about how like ESPN feed keeps cutting out, and it's like, I'm one of the few people where this house here has the internet like land hardwired here, so I'm stuck in the 90s with that technology. So when I see ESPN, you know, standby and progress technical difficulties, it's not my fault. It's this shitty app or program that they're working with. And it's like, really?
That's right.
And then it cuts out on fights, and clearly they're just simulcasting whatever VHS feed you're getting, which boggles the mind. The technology's there, Jacob. They have to do better with this stuff.
They do,
like,
especially now being a boxer fan. It's frustrating because I just can't go to one spot and watch boxing. I got to pay $139 for the zone a year. I got to pay $8 a month for ESPN Plus or whatever is the bundled Disney package. And then I got to pay for pay-per-view with Fox Sports. The worst one has to be Showtime because that app just doesn't work worth a darn. You know what's
funny? You're the third person this week that's taught me that, and I've asked them about that, and they said they're working on it. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
because Showtime does not allow you to cast unless you have Chromecast. Who the fuck uses Chromecast anymore? I should be able just to mirror my screen.
My day job uses Google, and they don't even use Chromecast. They use Chromebooks, for Christ's sake. So I don't know who still has that.
So, Chromecast. I'm like, no. My shit is equipped to. I'm able to cast whatever the hell I want on my TV, but Showtime and Fox pay-per-view too. They're both of them are the same way. But what's the most frustrating thing about what you do?
For me personally, it's just the fact that, especially with boxing, boxing in general, for me, is that we're not getting enough fights to talk about. That's my biggest problem. Where it's like, you can go on any day on social media, Jacob, as you well know. You can scroll on your timeline. Someone's still badgering about Canelo Triple G1. It's like, man, we gotta let this go. Like, there's current fights that are happening this year.
Give us something else to talk about.
In it. Like, and unfortunately, I mean, unfortunately, we're getting fight announcements of like Miguel Burchell versus Jeremiah Nakatilla. It's like, it's not exactly blowing any door or revolving ramp or a wheelchair ramp at this matter, but at least if they keep the fights coming, like, that's been my thing. Is like they keep dripping these fight announcements, and it's like, these aren't. You would think these fight announcements were like when the NFL does like the NFL schedule thing, like, stay tuned, we're gonna roll out the NFC West schedule next, and it's like, no, it's two guys getting in the ring, like, give it to us and keep it moving. Like, what are we doing? I don't care when the Bengals play the Saints in week 17 right now. Give us the fights already.
That's right. Give us the fights. With that, who was the boxer? Who's that fighter that's just your guy? You're gonna ride and die with that guy from the time you laid eyes on him or her. Who is that boxer?
You know what that fighter is? I'm gonna show my local homerism here, and it's the current guy. It's currently Keith Thurman, and I know he's a flawed individual. I know he's still the guy with the flute. I mean, he cut his hair. I know he didn't knock out Barrios. I know he tried. I know it's Keith Thurman present day. I know he says he wants Spence. Now that he doesn't have anything that Spence wants, but I understand the guy's flaw.
He's entirely long-winded.
Yeah, but my thing with Furman that I do love is that he is genuine, despite all the silliness and whatever he says. He's genuine and he's honest. In fact, some would say probably too honest, actually. But that's the thing I like about him. It's like, he's just, personally, I think Keith Furman is the closest I've ever seen to a boxer that I've been around that's been closest to one of us, realistically, without being like out of it, like being out of element. Like, he's not going around town wearing like like the weird Shawn Porter suits or showing you like on Instagram the new whip he's bought. I mean, he has a new whip. He has a new whip every time I see him. It's like, but still, he's not the flashy guy that's gonna throw it in your face. So
Shawn Porter suits are epic, and since he's retired, they have taken a filter off of his mouth because he's saying some shit lately. I'm like, have you listened to his podcast?
Yes, in fact, I ran into Shawn Porter for the first time actually last Saturday at Chocolatito Estrada. I kid you not, Estrada, it's Chocolatito Martinez. Estrada was supposed to be the guy, but it's funny because like that whole fight, as that fight arena in San Diego felt like one of those like weird like boxing like super parties per se, where like you see the boxing media that are out there and you see the fighters and whatnot. Like, I mean, Canelo wasn't a. I'm gonna say. I'm a simple boxing writer for New York Fights, Jacob. But I was in the same room as Canelo, Shawn Porter, and Eddie Hearn, and a couple other big time wigs, and along with your higher ranking media and whatnot. It's like, oh, this is what's up. So, and it was a sellout, and the crowd was nuts, and the guy I ran into at the weigh-in had his Nicaraguan flag at the media center, and that was a little off. But anyway,
so no, I'm a big fan. Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, but back to your point, because I kind of ramped off on that. But back to Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter was just been off the cuff lately, and I do love that about him, because I mean he's not having to be dealing with the corporate umbrella anymore, which is fine because now he's been transitioning into broadcasting. That's what you want to hear from fighters. You don't want to hear,
right. That's right.
He's keeping it to the vest and all this stuff.
He absolutely hates that third fight with Triple G and Canelo. He is not a fan of that fight, man.
To his defense, I'm in that camp too. That fight sucks, and honestly, that fight's only made because they reminded when they signed. My theory is on this, and this is only my crackhead theory on this. So take for what it's worth, and throw the aluminum helmet if you'd like. But when Triple G signed with the Zone, the ironclad thing they promised him was that third fight with Triple G, with Canelo. And for all intents and purposes, when Canelo was with Golden Boy, he wanted no part of Triple G for one reason or another. I don't care why. He just didn't, because in his mind, he won both fights and kept it moving. So at this point, now it's like a make safe, and they threw in Vivo, which is actually a fight that I'm not that high on either personally, but I see the appeal of it at least. And then they back in that with this Golovkin fight. It kind of. And I think at the weigh-in, they mentioned the press conference originally for Vivo, they mentioned the third fight for Canelo being John Ryder. It's like, this isn't exactly a murderer's row here that he dealt with last year, for Canelo, but I get it. But it's like, oh, yuck. Like if I could name you a string of 3 fights I don't really care for, it would probably be those 3. But back to your point with Triple G, though, but it's like, that fight should have happened when I first started working at Big Fight Weekend in 2018. It's 4 years too late at this point. Like, that fight should have happened already.
That's right. No, I agree. It should have happened already. And I wrote an article back in December when the Caleb Plant Canelo fight concluded, and the 5 fighters that who could dethrone Canelo right now. And my article, none of them at that point could, but if anybody had a better chance, is the reason why I picked Triple G. I still picked him to lose, but I say if anybody would be Triple G, because of the experience. He's been in the ring with him twice. So, now whether he could execute and capitalize on that experience, it's another thing to be seen. Now, boxing Twitter is a thing, a real thing.
It's amazingly horrendous.
It's made up of writers, boxers, promoters, fans, and a small minority actually fall into the trolls.
Yeah.
And everybody that has been on boxing Twitter has a moment. My moment hasn't come yet, and I don't even want to fathom or think about when that moment is going to be. But your moment was when you got denied by the Boxers' Rights Association to be inducted. And you were simply asking a question. And somehow you got blocked, and everybody that supported you got blocked. What fucking fiasco! That went on a little tiny too long. What happened?
What's funny about that was I think there was in fact, and it's funny you mentioned that, because that was, speaking of Chris Colbert, I think that happened during Chris Colbert King Tug Week, out of all things. And it's like, I think I overshadowed that, unfortunately, on boxing Twitter, which was not my intent at all, because all I was asking for, and with fair reason, by the way, I applied for the BWAA back in like 2019. And it was like 2 years. I saw them on Twitter, congratulate Coppinger for, getting ESPN, whatever have you. So I figured, all right, so someone's working on this account right now. Hey, been 2 years. What happened? So so let me make this story back to you, Jacob. I had to get my rejection from a forwarded email from Cliff Roy from Boxing Scene. Once I got a forwarded hand-me-down rejection email, that's when I was like, fuck this, fuck you guys, let's do this. So I was like, hey, why am I getting this third hand? And then instead of getting an actual answer, they decided to block me and all of boxing Twitter. And it's funny because the only explanation, Jacob, that I've gotten was they compared me to a fan with a blog site, which is fine and all. But if you look at my fucking resume, I had worked with Tony Bruno for over a decade. I've been on radio. I've been in print media. For a fan with a blog site, Jacob, I've gotten kind of pretty far, right? I'm just being honest. Like, some would say that, I don't know, I'm probably media. Been writing about it. I mean, so
Yeah.
But that was the reasoning and all that stuff. But my whole thing, Jacob, honestly, was like, people forget that that's a yearly club thing where you got to drop. I think it's like $40-50 a year to sign up for it. Where it's like, so my money, the way I took it personally, and why I still take offense to it, was my money wasn't good enough for them. So it's like, well, fuck your couch. So
Yeah.
You can hear the animosity, but I kid you not, it's not as big as I make it sound. But I just thought it was funny. It was like, hey, why am I not in? And instead of me getting a reason why I'm not in, I got half of boxing Twitter blocked on a random boxing account. I thought that was more justice than anything else. And you mentioned trolls, by the way, which is funny because this was one of the few times where boxing Twitter gets united on probably about one of like three things. Whenever Dillian White gets knocked out, whoever wins the big time heavyweight fight between either Tyson Fury and Wilder, that was a big thing. Or whenever Adrian Broner shows up. Those are pretty much like universal three things for the more often than not. When that block button was being handed down from everybody, and it's only funny because what started on my end, actually, once I was blocked, that was fine. But that account started blocking like Beto Duran and like actual boxing people. It was like, like, all right. It's like, be my guest.
Yeah.
Go ahead and
Go
ahead and keep firing employees on major platforms that broadcast the sport. Yeah, that's the move. But
bro, people rallying around your calls like I thought they were going to wear shirts and rally and be like, free Marquis.
You would have thought I was in jail the way I was being like castrated for all this. It's like, no, I just got a forwarded email for a rejection that I wanted an answer for because I got it forwarded. Like, look, I just want an actual reason.
But eventually it worked itself out. And some people actually show face and explain the process of the situation. And I'm glad they did that for you eventually. And some stand-up folks did,
Yeah, well, they kind of had, not for nothing, Jacob. They kind of had to. The way they handled the whole thing on Twitter was kind of bush league. So it was like, all right. Yeah. And my thing with the person was, I kind of just waited back. Was like, all right, I was really just waiting for the block button on Twitter because the response I sent back was like, look, I got a forwarded email from 2 years ago that didn't explain anything. Kiss my ass. And that was my response back, and I got blocked. It was like, that's expected. Started blocking everybody else. Was like, oh, like, yeah, this is beyond me. It's like, it's like, not for nothing, Jacob. It's to be a part of a writing association so I can get a Hall of Fame vote. That's all I wanted was a Hall of Fame vote. I can still get said Hall of Fame vote without being in the association. So It's like, all right.
That's right.
There's other ways around the circle here. But and I say it all the time with stuff like this too, and Jacob was like, especially in boxing's not that big to be doing horse shit like that. It really isn't. And it's like, all right.
Yeah. Oh, I get it, man. I think the sport needs as many of us, whether we're fans that write or whatever we're bringing light to the sport. And you're a good writer. You do your research. You put your time in, and for your stories, and coming out on podcasts like this and all that, it just brings light to the sport. At the end of the day, we all boxer fans that want the sport to thrive. I think that's, of course, that's what we want. So that I'm a big music fan, and I like I gravitate to two main genres, which is hip hop and salsa music. And
all right,
what genre does Marquis like to delve in?
It's funny. Like when I worked in radio, I was a big fan of the top 40 stuff when I was there at the time. Like when I was there at the station in 04 before Clear Channel decided to be Cheap Channel, like they're known now today as iHeartMedia. I was a big fan of rap for the longest. Like anything like for the most part, because I see you drop it all the time on your quotes and tweets and whatnot. Like anything mid 90s or late 90s rap and early 2000s rap, I am all over it. Like I saw you post the Nas, they shook, made you look. I saw that, I'm all over that stuff. It's like, because personally, my favorite album that I can listen to at any given moment, no matter what mood I'm in, good, bad, happy, sleepy, whatever. Camp Lo's Uptown Saturday Night is easily my favorite, and that's the album that everybody.
My God, some people don't even know who the hell Camp Lo is, man.
If you guys don't know who Gucci Suede is, man,
this is it. That's the
from the sky. Let's get the sugar dimes. Like people need that in their lives. Like, wow, seriously,
that is one of my favorite songs because that groove, that had kind of the same groove that Digable Planet had. That
Yeah.
man, that's man, Marquis. Yeah, man. Yeah. I like Camp
Dude,
Blood.
that's
Camp
the,
Blood's
that's the
good.
vibe that people need with music, man. It's stuff like that, and I see to give people because that's 90s stuff. The current people that are doing that currently that are even close to that, by the way, Jacob, is Earth Gang. New Earth Gang album is pretty solid, man. They're on that same kind of vibe. It's kind of what Dream Deal does essentially. That they're kind of a vibe kind of thing.
Nice, man. Yeah, there's some people doing their thing now, man, and try to captivate.
How much J. Cole you want to hear, but
there's some good stuff out there, man. I like the new Mary J single. That was pretty good, man. I like that one, man. So
it's not bad either.
Rap Money was good, man. So
yeah, no, it's funny because like music, like people, my whole thing with music is I'm gonna be the 70-year-old guy who still listens to the radio like I'm on the news. I don't want to be that person like in the wheelchair being like, this ain't the music I grew up to. Man, every time I hear it just sounds so defeated and old. Like, no, like there's still music out there. Like people make music on YouTube for like 4 minutes. Like it's everywhere. It's not hard to get. And like let's not stick like in this weird time capsule of like, well, I only listen to 60s doo-wop. And it's like, oh man, sorry about your luck.
That's right. That's right. So when you're in the shower, what's the song you like to blare out? What comes out of your lungs when you're in the shower singing?
You know what's funny? It's an obscure cut, man. But the songs that I always go to, and it's kind of like my motivational piece. It's Nine's Overconfident. That's my song for the most part because of his voice. Because it's that whole gravelly New Jack City, like not New Jack City, but New York undercover mid-90s, like grimy, like it's like before DMX, but not really DMX kind of thing. It's all that sound. It's like run for the hills, that whole kind of shit. It's like I'm all about that. And that whole Nine album, 9 Lives, that's all he's doing over the whole record. And it's like, after you hear me, you won't be so overconfident. Like I can listen to that all day. Like that's just me.
That's good, man. I like that. All right, so let's get into some boxing real quick.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, we're gonna wrap this up here a little bit. We gotta get, I'm old. I gotta get my rest in before I gotta go back to my day job because we all got day. That's what's crazy about this. People don't know we're not just writers, man. We a lot of the stuff that we do on our personal time because writing's not paying the bills, man. So
no, listen, I joke all the time. I'm on boxing media money, man, and to give you a great example because you weren't at the fight for Chocolatito Martinez. They gave the media vouchers, man, and as you know, that food voucher it was a hot dog and a drink, which sounds amazing because you're at the arena. I mean, it's a $20 value, man. I mean, that personally, just give me the 20. But nonetheless, you're doing a lot of stuff like that.
Right.
It's kind of funny actually. Because you mentioned Shawn Porter and shout out to the Portway podcast and Shawn Zydo gave me his extra voucher actually that I still have in my pocket that I'm probably going to go back to use at the Berchenga at some point this year if I get back to make that down. Those things don't expire.
My gosh,
you
man.
those vouchers like Chick-fil-A coupons, but
that's right. So Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez, who wins that fight?
I think. You know what's funny? I think this fight's going to be boring as sin, and I think Stevenson's going to win by decision because it's going to be boring as sin. Because that's just what I think that Herring fight was an anomaly, and I say an anomaly only because I don't know what version of Herring that was in the ring that showed up personally. Like he wasn't throwing back. Like by the second round of that fight, you realize you could have beat Kanye West in traffic out of the State Farm Arena to get out of there. But it was one of those things where it's like I don't know what version of Herring we were getting there. So I think that was it because. We've seen Stevenson. We've seen Stevenson not stop fighters. We've seen him not stop Nakatilia, Toka Cleary. I mean, these are not exactly world beaters here. So, but I think with Valdez, if Valdez can stay away from Stevenson, which I think he will do, and that's why I think it's going to be boring. Because I think he's going to stay away from him. It's going to be one of those distance kind of things that see if he can land this hook that sooner or later. But because it's going to land, we'll find out if Stevenson can resist it. But I think at the end of the day, just that Stevenson's going to win on points. It's just going to be one of those tactical decisions.
I've said this before. I follow Valdez from the very, very beginning. And people fail to realize, he's like a Philly. Mexicans and Philly fighters cut from the same cloth. No matter how gifted they are, they are going to go in there and duke it out to prove that they belong with Philly and they belong with Mexico. And Oscar Valdez
flipped doing that.
Yeah, Oscar Valdez could box, man. A lot of people don't know that about Oscar. Oscar got some skills, bro, but he always gets sucked into a brawl, And so I don't know which Oscar's going to show up. If the brawling Oscar shows up, Shakur Stevenson is going to box his head off. If the boxer Oscar shows up, then like you said, it'll probably be a boring fight. All right, Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, who you got?
I'm going with the upset here. I think Serrano's going to win this, and I saw originally that they think that she's going to be too small to meet Katie Taylor at 140. I just think Serrano's just a fresher fighter at this point. I'm going with her over anything else. Honestly, I know Katie Taylor's been like this undisputed lightweight champion for God knows how long, but she has been facing what they've been throwing at her, and that's really been about it. And it's like it's a running gag I used to hear when people talk about like some of the people always like calling fighters bums and all that nonsense. For guys they don't know. Like I kind of find it to be a little offensive. That bum will punch you in the face. That bum may drive an Uber car and that will punch you in the face. So you try to avoid that nonsense. That's why I always use the word favorable opposition. Katie Taylor has been facing some favorable opposition since this pandemic, to be honest with you. Outside of the Pursoon fight, the first one where she lost easily, but I mean, she made it back in the second fight, back in the second go around when it was COVID stuff. But I just think at this point, Katie Taylor's at this point, I think Father Time is catching with Katie Taylor at this point because she's the way you mentioned brawls, and I think she gets something in the brawls too, where it's like she makes her fights hard than what they look, and that's and if that happens with Serrano, I think Serrano does. I don't think Serrano stops her, but I think Serrano puts a really big hurt on her.
Gotcha. How does Tank and Rolly play out?
I said it before the rape charge allegations one came through, and I'll say it afterwards. I still think that fight has TKO2 written all over it. That fight does not last long. It just doesn't. Like no one's unless Rolly has picked up some sort of fundamentals that's going to help him block Tank Davis. I don't see it. I mean, we all know Rolly can run his mouth. We've seen it on the internet. I mean, that's given. We know what he talks about. That's all fun. That's going to sell this fight. I don't think this fight's going to be any good, but that's going to sell it. I mean, it's for feeder of the mind, Jacob. That's one of those fights that I wish that Showtime would just put on regular television, where it's like, because essentially what they're doing is they're putting Wilder Brazil on pay-per-view. That's what I think this is, and it's like, you really want to do that? So, I mean, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. All right, last question before I let you get out of here. What can boxing give Marquis in 2022?
Boxing in 2022 can give me, that's a very good question, actually, because I'm thinking, like, what can it offer me that I don't have, which is, at this point, fights, obviously. But besides the obvious of fights, and what I'm looking for in boxing 2022 is just that the landscape to change as a whole for boxing in general. Like, right now, like for the last 3 or 4 years of me just covering boxing, it seems like boxing has been on autopilot, and like everything that we do, like from the media stuff, from the front end to the conference, to the press conferences, the same 4 questions before and after, where it's like, hey, what do you think about this? I mean, who do you want to fight next? It's all it feels automated, like a lot of it. I wish there was a way to change some of that. This as a whole. That's what I want boxing to do for me to change in terms of that. Outside of the actual system itself being the system, just more fights. I'm good.
Gotcha. Well, listen, brother, it was a pleasure having you on. This was exactly what I thought this interview was going to be like. It was fun. My cheeks hurt from laughing. You are an amazing writer. You are definitely a even better human being, and I'm happy to know you and share this time with you. Thanks for coming on my show, brother.
Jacob, thanks for having me on, man. Anytime you want me on, man, feel free to have me on. Thanks so much.
Will do, brother. I'm gonna in a couple more weeks, I'm gonna have my Cold Truth with John Scully. We'll probably bring you on as a guest, brother.
Oh yeah, I love Iceman. Iceman's good people.
All right, man. Sounds good, brother. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Jacob.
All right, bye-bye.